Take a SIG P365 loaded with quality defensive 9mm ammunition and put it next to something like a Ruger LCP2 light rack, a Taurus TX22 Compact, or another dependable .22 long rifle handgun, and the conversation gets complicated in a hurry. One side brings stronger terminal performance, better penetration, and the proven reliability advantages of centerfire ammunition. The other side offers softer recoil, faster follow-up shots, and a training budget that doesn't feel like a monthly financial emergency. Over the years, I've noticed something interesting. The self-defense conversation gets messy the moment you start factoring in recoil tolerance, concealment, reliability, hand strength, and how often people actually train. That's where the simple answers start falling apart. Today, we're taking an honest look at 9mm versus .22 long rifle for personal defense, not internet mythology, not caliber wars, just the reality shooters face when they start carrying and training in the real world. Let's break it down. Walk into almost any gun store and ask for a concealed carry recommendation. Chances are you'll hear the same names within seconds. Glock 43X, SIG P365, Springfield Hellcat, Smith & Wesson Shield Plus. The recommendations come so quickly that sometimes it feels less like personalized advice and more like a preloaded script. And honestly, there's a reason for that. 9mm earned its place as the default defensive handgun cartridge through decades of proven performance. Quality defensive loads are everywhere. Federal HST, Speer Gold Dot, Winchester Ranger T, and Horn AD Critical Defense have extensive track records built on real-world use, not just advertising claims and ballistic gel demonstrations. Centerfire ignition is inherently more reliable than rimfire ignition. Magazine availability is excellent. Parts are easy to find. Ammunition is widely available. From a practical standpoint, the cartridge checks almost every box. On paper, it's an easy recommendation. But that's where things start getting interesting. Many shooters buy a micro-compact 9mm because they're told it's the responsible choice. Then they head to the range and discover something nobody warned them about. They don't actually enjoy shooting the gun. A P365 or Hellcat hides exceptionally well under a t-shirt. Unfortunately, that same compact size often translates into snappier recoil, a smaller grip surface, and a shooting experience that can quickly frustrate newer shooters. The hidden problem is that many people choose the caliber first and only later realize they dislike shooting the pistol attached to it. A defensive handgun should encourage practice. It should make training feel productive and repeatable. If you're constantly talking yourself into going to the range, something in the equation isn't working. 9mm absolutely deserves its reputation. That doesn't automatically make it the correct answer for every shooter. A lot of concealed carriers believe they're getting the best possible setup when they purchase a micro-compact 9mm. Small size, easy concealment, serious defensive cartridge. Sounds perfect. Then reality shows up at the first extended range session. Pistols like the SIG P365, Glock 43, and Springfield Hellcat typically weigh somewhere between 17 and 21 ounces, unloaded. They pack full-power 9mm ammunition into frames barely larger than older 380 ACP pocket pistols. That's great for carry. It's not always great for shooting. The lighter slide, shorter grip, and reduced overall size change the recoil experience dramatically. Even though the cartridge is identical, recoil feels sharper and more abrupt than what most shooters experience with larger pistols like a Glock 19 or Smith & Wesson M and P Compact. Muzzle rise becomes more noticeable. Follow-up shots often slow down. Shooters have less grip area to work with, and anyone who doesn't train consistently tends to notice those differences immediately. A lot of people quickly discover that carrying a P365 is far easier than shooting 200 rounds through one. The situation becomes even more obvious when defensive ammunition enters the picture. Standard 115 grain FMJ range ammunition is relatively mild. Swap in 124 grain plus P Federal HST or Spear Gold Dot, and suddenly that tiny pistol feels considerably more aggressive. That's important because your defensive performance depends on the ammunition you actually carry, not the soft practice ammunition you shoot once a month. Small pistols also expose poor shooting fundamentals faster. The short sight radius magnifies mistakes, trigger slapping, recoil anticipation, grip inconsistencies, and poor trigger control become obvious on target. That's why so many people buy the perfect carry gun and quietly stop enjoying practice. The pistol carries beautifully. The shooting experience is another story. People love dismissing .22 long rifle whenever self-defense enters the conversation. Yet the cartridge keeps coming back. There's a reason for that. It's incredibly easy to shoot well, and that's more important than many shooters want to admit. Take a Taurus TX22 Compact, Ruger SR22, or Smith & Wesson M&P22 Compact and compare the recoil to a micro 9mm. The difference is immediate. Recoil is minimal, muzzle rise is minimal, follow-up shots are faster, trigger control is easier, flinching becomes less common. For newer shooters, older shooters, recoil-sensitive shooters, or people with limited hand strength, accurate shooting often comes much easier with a .22 long rifle pistol. Capacity is another overlooked factor. A TX22 Compact offers 13+1 rounds. The full-size TX22 carries 16-round magazines. Even the compact Ruger SR22 provides 10+1 capacity in a small package. That's a lot of opportunities from a cartridge critics often dismiss as too small. Multiple accurate hits delivered rapidly tend to outperform a missed shot backed by a lecture about caliber superiority. Then there's the training advantage. .22 long rifle ammunition remains dramatically less expensive than quality 9mm. 500 rounds of decent rimfire practice ammunition often costs less than a few boxes of premium defensive 9mm. People shoot more because they can afford to shoot more. Skill comes from repetition. Repetition requires ammunition. Even terminal performance isn't quite as weak as some people pretend. Loads such as CCI Mini Mag, Federal Punch 22, and Winchester Silver Tip can produce respectable penetration when fired from defensive length barrels. No, .22 long rifle isn't ideal, but neither is carrying a more powerful handgun you barely train with. The reason .22 long rifle keeps showing up in these conversations is simple. People actually use it. This is where the strongest argument against .22 long rifle begins. Reliability. A defensive firearm is supposed to reduce uncertainty, not introduce more of it. Unfortunately, rimfire ammunition carries inherent limitations that centerfire ammunition simply doesn't share. A 9mm cartridge uses a centerfire primer positioned in the center of the case head. The firing pin strikes a dedicated primer cup, resulting in highly consistent ignition. .22 long rifle works differently. The priming compound is distributed around the rim of the cartridge case. If that compound isn't distributed evenly during manufacturing, ignition problems can occur even when the firing pin strike is perfectly adequate. Anyone who has spent enough time shooting rimfire has experienced it. Click, no bang. Bulk ammunition is particularly notorious for occasional failures. Federal Automatch, older Remington Golden bullets, and various bargain pack offerings have all earned reputations for reminding shooters about the limitations of rimfire ignition. Premium loads such as CCI Mini Mag Federal Punch and CCI Velociter improve reliability substantially, but they don't eliminate the underlying design limitation. A misfire during casual practice is annoying. A misfire during a defensive encounter is something else entirely. Revolvers partially mitigate this problem because another trigger pull immediately rotates a fresh round into position. Semi-automatic pistols like the TX22 or Ruger SR22 require malfunction clearing procedures. Under stress, even a 1-second delay can feel significant. That's why reliability remains the biggest obstacle, preventing many experienced shooters from fully embracing .22 long rifle for personal defense. Buying a defensive handgun is easy. Maintaining proficiency is where things become difficult. Most concealed carriers eventually end up with some version of the same handgun. A P365, a Glock 43X, a Hellcat, a Shield Plus, all excellent carry pistols, all relatively small, all honest about recoil. When shooters start feeding those guns steady diet that's of 124 grain or 147 grain defensive ammunition, especially plus P loads, recoil becomes something they must actively manage. That affects training. Many owners practice primarily with inexpensive 115 grain FMJ ammunition because it's cheaper and softer than the defensive ammunition they carry. Recoil characteristics, point of impact, and even reliability can differ between those loads. If someone only shoots their carry ammunition once or twice a year, much of their confidence exists only in theory. Then money enters the equation. 500 rounds of monthly 9mm practice, plus periodic defensive ammunition testing adds up quickly. Premium loads like Federal HST, Spear Gold Dot, and Critical Defense often cost around $1 per round or more. Eventually, many shooters reduce training frequency, not because they're lazy, because ammunition is expensive. Compare that to a TX22 or Ruger Mark IV. Suddenly, hundreds of rounds of practice become realistic. Draw drills, reloads, transitions, malfunction clearing, and basic marksmanship all become easier to afford. The shooter firing 300 rounds of .22 long rifle every week is often building stronger trigger control than someone carrying a micro 9mm that only leaves the holster every couple of months. That reality makes many people uncomfortable. It doesn't make it less true. Real defensive encounters don't happen on a square range. There's no shot timer, no hearing protection, no perfect lighting, no calm breathing. Violence arrives unexpectedly and usually under terrible conditions. Heart rate skyrockets. Fine motor skills begin disappearing. Trigger presses become jerks instead of smooth presses. Tunnel vision narrows perception. Reloads suddenly feel far more difficult than they did during practice. This is where small defensive handguns expose weaknesses quickly. A micro 9mm that already felt challenging on a calm day becomes significantly harder to control when stress enters the equation. Accurate hits determine outcomes, not caliber arguments. A shooter running a soft-shooting TX22 or Ruger SR22 and delivering rapid, accurate hits may perform better than someone carrying premium 9mm ammunition while struggling with recoil anticipation and poor trigger control. That statement makes some people uncomfortable. Targets tend to be brutally honest. None of this changes the legitimate advantages of 9mm. Better penetration matters. Better terminal performance matters. Center fire reliability matters. FBI testing standards prioritize consistent 12 to 18-inch penetration for good reasons. .22 long rifle doesn't magically ignore physics, but defensive encounters aren't controlled or laboratory experiments either. They're chaotic, they're fast, and people miss more often than they like admitting. Familiarity, confidence, and automatic gun handling become extremely valuable under those conditions. A carry gun should feel predictable enough that your brain focuses on solving the problem instead of wrestling with the firearm itself. The internet loves turning caliber discussions into personality contests. Unfortunately, real life isn't that simple. For the majority of shooters, 9mm remains the smarter defensive choice. Center fire reliability is a significant advantage. Better penetration is a significant advantage. Proven defensive loads like Federal HST, Speer Gold Dot, and Winchester Ranger T exist for good reasons. If you can comfortably and consistently shoot a reliable 9mm pistol, such as a Glock, 19, Shield Plus, or P365, there is very little reason not to carry it. The cartridge earned its status. But not everyone lives in the same reality. Older shooters dealing with arthritis, people recovering from hand injuries, shooters with reduced hand strength, new gun owners who tense up every time a micro 9mm recoils in their palm. Those people exist. Hand one of them a Taurus TX22, Ruger SR22, or a quality .22 long rifle revolver, and sometimes everything changes. The grip becomes easier to manage. Follow-up shots become faster. Training becomes more frequent. Confidence improves. The gun stops being something they admire from a distance and becomes something they actually use. A carry pistol is a tool, not a morality test. The correct answer is the firearm you can draw, control, fire accurately, and trust under pressure, not the one that wins arguments online. For most people, 9mm remains the winner. For some people, a reliable .22 long rifle may be the better practical choice. Pretending those people don't exist is exactly how bad advice survives for years.